I had heard of Bitcoin as early as like 2010, 2011. When I heard about this Bitcoin thing, I was like, okay, internet money. I was like, oh, I'm not touching that. And I
Right.
knew a little bit about what's going on with Silk Road, and I was like, that I'm staying far away from that. Sounds like a disaster. Take the time to learn about it because if you don't, you become like you don't know what you're kind of buying, and you become overly. The only thing you know is price, and then you become very emotional with your investment.
When do you see Bitcoin hitting $1 million plus, and how far do you think it can go over the next, I would say, 20, 30 years? Hey guys, welcome back to the Grant Mitt Podcast, episode number 126. I have a special guest, D. Lewis, on the podcast. He's the Chief Financial Officer of Bitcoin Inc., which is the company that runs the Bitcoin Conference, which is the largest crypto conference in the world. They started off, you said, I think you mentioned right before, they started off on a top of a San Francisco parking garage to now. I mean, how many people have y'all had over the last couple of years?
I mean, geez, cumulatively since 2019, all attendees, I mean, well over 110, 120,000 over that period. So it's been it's definitely been a wild ride from those sort of humble origins on the parking lot in San Francisco.
Absolutely. Well, tell me about just the journey of Bitcoin. How long were you interested in the space and started investing in it? And then what is it like seeing it, cross the 100,000 mark, which was something that, we've been talking about in crypto for quite a long time.
Yeah, it's still surreal to see that price. I was always kind of, at a point in time like a hopium, like distant dream kind of price that you didn't really, you couldn't fathom kind of being here. But what's amazing, it's here, and people kind of feel bored with it already. So it kind of goes to show you market psychology and how, when your dreams and reality collide, you kind of move on from that and go back to dreams again. Now people are talking about what is a million going to feel like, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I got involved in Bitcoin in around early 2017, and I like to think my entry point is a little bit unique because I didn't get involved from like an investment standpoint. Now, I had heard of Bitcoin as early as like 2010, 2011. And I like to think, just as this sort of millennial that grew up to the internet age, I kind of grew up to kind of like distrust things on the internet a little bit. Like everything's a little bit
Right.
scammy. And then when I heard about this Bitcoin thing, I was like, okay, internet money. I was like, oh, I'm not touching that. And I
Right.
knew a little bit about what's going on with Silk Road, and I was like, that I'm staying far away from that. Sounds like a disaster. And so 2017, I kind of crossed paths with it, but not from an investment opportunity. I actually was, a very avid sports bettor. And this is before FanDuel and DraftKings, when now it's very mainstream. And, I was living in Chicago at the time. And so the only opportunity I could bet was via sort of these offshore sites. And the only way I could actually cash out was through Bitcoin. It was the
Uh,
last option to actually get any, to collect my money. And I remember I did it very begrudgingly. I was like, well, I guess I got to do this. I have no other choice. So I took it out. It was like February 2017, and the joke here is that because I think it was right after the Super Bowl, is that when I withdrew it, I then was like, well, I'm not gonna just sell it. I'm gonna need it again because football season is gonna be around the corner, 7 months next fall. So I'll just not touch it. And the funny joke is, I made more money on paper just leaving it there from February to September than I ever had ever betting sports.
right.
So that was a light bulb moment when I saw it
Wow.
go up so much to just figure out what's happening and diving in, kind of learning about it. And it was also kind of cool to me to think that, hey, it was interesting that moment that this became money as a last resort because I couldn't call my bank, I couldn't use Western Union, and so that was the switch that then kind of sent me down the proverbial rabbit hole that everyone describes.
Love it. Do you think that, what about for investors that they haven't invested in Bitcoin yet? Maybe more traditional investors, more long term. They didn't really understand Bitcoin, but obviously now it's kind of past that test. It's here to stay. Do you think it's still too early to invest?
I definitely think so. So I encounter this all the time. I become in my social circle, even of friends that kind of know Bitcoin as the Bitcoin guy. I
Yeah.
think most social circles have that, and so that's me. And what's frustrating is they always get curious when things are very hot and things,
Right.
the market's very extended, and they're like, "Oh, now you're talking to me." They never want to talk to me when it's getting beat up and it's kind of in a more of a cycle low. But
Uh-huh.
what I tell them, and what I would tell any sort of investor that's curious is take the time to learn. You don't need to become a software engineer. You don't need to become a cryptographer, but take the time. There's so many resources out there. I guess in the interest of being prescriptive, I'll shout out, The Internet of Money by Andreas Antonopoulos. That was my first book I read, just kind of like, what is this thing? Very easy read, very good for, a lot of layman terms and things like that. And take the time to learn about it, because if you don't, you become like you don't know what you're kind of buying, and you become overly, the only thing you know is price, and then you become very emotional with your investment because you don't
Right.
know anything underlying that price. You just see the price go up, you feel good, go down, what's going on, and you just get. And I've witnessed this firsthand with so many people that have gone to Bitcoin and reach out to me. It's just every text, why is it going up? Why is it going down? Why is it going? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I was like, understand the like fundamental technology, and that is where your conviction, and that's where my conviction is, and that's why I since 2017 have weathered 50% 70% drawdowns, relatively comfortably, because I understand the base of technology. I have a strong conviction that it's not really going anywhere. And anyway, so that's my biggest recommendation is take the time to learn about it, before you put money behind it.
Agreed. I remember, guys, in 2018 when it dropped down to, guys, what it was like under 10,000, I believe, right?
I think 2018 is when it's so I think
3,000.
27, I think went down to three, right? Oh, no, no,
Yeah,
sorry. I'm thinking of the 2020 crash when it
that
went
was
down to
another
three.
crash. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, that
from anywhere from 20, 27, late 2017, but it was really 2018 through 2020. The
yeah.
swings that we saw in Bitcoin, we haven't seen since. I mean, I remember there would be times where I'm like losing hundreds of thousands of dollars and I'm trying to remain calm.
Yeah.
And but once you learn the fundamentals, I think that's such a good point because when you understand it, you look at it from a completely different perspective. Because most people who don't understand Bitcoin, they just look at it as, okay, it's up this much, so Bitcoin's good now, and they only pay attention, like you're saying, when it's a bull run and it hits some all-time record. They don't pay attention to it when it's low, and that's when they should be paying attention to it even more because they're buying it at a discount.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. So I think learning about it and building conviction around the technology and its sort of sturdiness and the durability of it. I think what I've seen from friends that are starting to get more comfortable with it, not because it's at a higher price or because ETFs are not involved. I will say that's given them an added level of comfort because a lot of times people outsource their thinking to smarter people, which is totally
Sure.
fine. I think that's a shortcut in life that is always worth sort of taking. But they now understand the technology enough that those sort of underlying fears that most people have when they start exploring Bitcoin of like the government's going to ban it, it's going to get hacked, they're going to change the supply, like all these sort of like like fair things, that very great questions to ask when you're learning about this strange foreign internet money first time.
Mhm.
Once those fears are alleviated when you understand the rigidity of this system. This is the most secure computing network in the history of like mankind. It's got like 99.9% uptime. And when you dive into, you look a little under the hood, like I said, you don't have to become a cryptographer. Your conviction, those drawdowns we just talked about, you can stomach them a little bit more because you think, well, this in this moment this stinks, but this technology is not going away, and this is gonna be a temporary pullback. In 5, 10 years, it'll be higher, and so far, history has proven that to be correct.
Absolutely. So last year, y'all had the president speak at the conference in Nashville, and there's been a ton of talk about a Bitcoin reserve for the United States, and also a lot of different countries across the country. You've heard, different rumors about this. I saw Arizona just announced that they're going to have a Bitcoin reserve and a couple others. How far out do you think that is from becoming a reality?
Yeah, so maybe it's because it's the CFO in me, and I'm always naturally, I have to always be a little bit grounded and temper my sort of expectations on these things. I think well, there's steps, right? And so these first steps have taken. It's a kind of insane even to think about that we have a sitting president that has sort of advocated for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. I go back to my more humble days in 2017 when this thing was just still a little bit more foreign.
Yeah.
In terms of actually being actualized and effectuated, I'm kind of finger in the air guessing, but I would say it's gonna be slower than people think because, even, especially in the political sphere, you kind of have to bring your constituency along with you. And, Bitcoiners, people that are interested in cryptocurrency, I mean, it's still, probably, at least for, I can only speak to the US, less than maybe 15, 10% of people have any exposure. So
Hmm.
getting, when you think about your voting constituency, getting all these other people that don't really have any skin in the game excited about that, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. We still have work to do. I think the seeds are planted, but in the interest of being having a little fun and giving a guess for the strategic Bitcoin reserve, actually like U.S. adding something to it, maybe going to take at least another year. I know President Trump and this administration's got a lot of, I don't say bigger fish to fry, so I
Yeah.
don't know how much it's on the front of their list. And then the states may be able to be a lot more nimble. I will give the states credit, just because they have a lot less sort of red tape to cut through. So
Right.
maybe we see this within the end of this year, the state and the federal government next year. That's my sort of throw
Sure.
the dart in the darkness kind of guess.
Yeah, I think it's just like it's like the 4 minute mile. Like once someone does it,
Yep.
obviously El Salvador did it, which is great, but it's a really small country. And there's even been speculation that there are countries right now that are purchasing it, but they're not announcing it. Do you think that's likely true?
I would go as far. Well, I can't confirm anything, but I would say it's more than likely true. I'm almost certain that there's definitely some sovereign wealth funds like adding to it, and other countries are just being a lot more hush hush. And I think there's some speculation around like the Kingdom of Bhutan. I think UAE is probably has some. Yeah, I think that's already definitely happening. I just think strategically those are it's interesting to see like El Salvador, they broadcast, I think almost daily, every time they add more Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And it's just maybe a little different cultural differences. I think other cultures don't want to sort of like broadcast and signal how much they own. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like that 4 minute mile that, until it happens, nobody believes that it can be done. And once somebody sees it, it piques curiosity. I would say a similar thing for MicroStrategy. Like, now we're seeing that, they were the first company, like corporation, to buy it. And then it was, I think people were a little bit disappointed that nobody else showed up after that. But now, it's like all things, it takes time, comfort, and now you're seeing just a wave of all these corporations coming in, adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet, and these sort of micro strategy copycats are showing up left and right. I think the same thing's going to happen with nation state adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. So when do you see Bitcoin hitting $1 million plus, and how far do you think it can go over the next, I would say 20, 30 years?
So, the one thing I've learned in Bitcoin is that the consensus price prediction that everyone has tends to not be the right thing in either direction. We either tend to be way under, or sorry, or ends up being like way over. And I think the consensus, like if I polled 1,000 Bitcoiners and asked this question, I think $1 million by 2030 has always kind of been this sort of like constant thing I've seen a lot. And once again, being, I don't know, if it's just me, the fabric of being a CFO and always having, to temper expectations. I think it'll be a little bit longer than that. So I think we see probably million, maybe, 2032, 2033. And let's not forget, I mean, it's already 2020, we're already halfway through 2025. I don't know how that happened. So
Right.
2030, I know 2030 is not that far away. And right now we're sitting here
Right.
at 104. So yeah, I would say like 2032, 2033, and then 20, 30 years. I mean, the sky is kind of the limit in terms of, how this currency works. If you're denominating in, fiat currency like US dollar, it's, to, use a quote from Michael Saylor, it's going up forever, Laura, is the actual quote. That's what's going to happen, right? Because you're denominating a fixed, scarce currency against, effectively an infinite currency that can be constantly, inflated. So it's hard to model beyond there because, to what degree is the US dollar going to continue to inflate over the next 20, 30 years? I don't know. But what I do know is that they're always going to debase the currency. It's how the system works. There's no, putting that genie back in the bottle.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, but 20, 30 years, I mean, you're probably talking at that point 10, 20 million dollars per Bitcoin, which, like I said, sounds insane. But if we were be talking here February 2017 when Bitcoin was 1,000, and we said, hey, it's gonna be 100,000, in 7, 8 years, we
Right.
we would also that multiple we would have similarly thought was insane. So
Sure.
I feel like we have to get comfortable with yeah, the just the big numbers, because I think that's where Bitcoin is headed.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about this? What does the mainstream media get wrong about Bitcoin and crypto?
Man, that's how much time do we have? um, I would say the biggest thing, man, yeah, there's a lot. I would say some of the biggest things that they get wrong is this notion that it's predominantly, I mean, it depends on which outlet you're talking to, but the notion that it's predominantly used by scammers, its main use case is crime. When the statistics in on-chain activity shows overwhelmingly that gets less than like 1%, half a percent of any of the usage. So and I think it's unfortunate because it does a disservice to Bitcoin and the industry. And my wife, she works in digital marketing, and so she talks to a lot of sort of like mainstream companies, and they actually they stay away from the word crypto because in their lexicon it's kind of it's associated with the word scam. And what's unfortunate is the media can't untangle the companies, the FTXs, the Lunas, the Celsiuses, and the what these bad actors at these companies did with the actual underlying technology. Like this
Right.
is just software, right? There's nothing inherently like bad at software. It's the actors that are trying to that sometimes have built these very sort of like deck of cards of businesses that have collapsed that have
Sure.
now kind of given a bad name. And what that does is that just delays adoption. It gets people more skittish. Like it's the same kind of reason why when I heard about 2010, 2011, I was like, I'm staying away from
Yeah.
that. So I would say that's the biggest thing is the media because they're always looking for a story that
Headline.
drives eyeballs, headlines.
Yeah.
Making crypto and Bitcoin look like a boogeyman serves them well, but it disserves their customers because there's nuance in that story.
Sure. So tell me about the conference. Who's speaking this year and what's it to expect? Obviously it's in Las Vegas, which is extremely exciting.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we're in Las Vegas. We're at the Venetian Expo, and yeah, which is super cool because Vegas, it's the entertainment capital of the world. It's the biggest stage, right? And
Right.
so, like, what's so hard about being a part of this conference and being helping build it, and I don't even take much credit. I'm just the guy that pays the bills. We have a fantastic production team.
Yeah.
They work so hard. I've worked a lot of companies, seen a lot of teams. I've never seen a team work harder than the team that works on this conference. I mean,
Gotcha.
I'm talking 24/7. We've got people across the world that work on this thing. And what's cool about it is that now we're on this biggest stage. But what's hard is that is like how are we going to top? Every year we're like after we're done and we take that breath when the conference is over, like all right, how do we top this? And so I don't know how we're going to top Vegas, but yeah, because not in terms of just the venue at the Venetian Expo, which is the one of the top expos so you can throw a conference in the world, Las Vegas, very fun city. Now the speakers, right? We have the sitting vice president, JD Vance, who's going to be there.
Nice.
We have, Ross Ulbricht from Silk Road, who has since been pardoned by Donald Trump, is going to be speaking there. I think this is one of his, first, yeah, I don't, maybe not public appearance, but, conferences he's sort of attending.
Right.
I think we have Arthur Hayes. There's still similar to last year at Nashville, we had a lot of sort of like a political attendance. I think they're going to see that as well with certain senators, Congress people, Cynthia Lummis, Michael Saylor. I mean, I can go on and on. It's a Super Bowl of Bitcoin. It's kind of what I tell people in my sort of elevator speech for it. It's the who's who. It's where the biggest announcements, corporate, nation state, development wise, it's where it's the place to be if you're interested in Bitcoin because it's where the biggest news sort of breaks.
Love that. Love that. So, last question is, do you see Bitcoin being more of a digital gold that's a reserve currency that people are, utilizing to store wealth, or do you see it more as a currency that people are consistently transacting?
So I love that you asked this question because one of the exciting things we're doing at the conference is we actually are working to set the Guinness World Record of the most Bitcoin transactions in one spot in one day.
Nice.
So it's a great question because right now I think the answer would be it's a store of value, it's an investment. You buy it, don't touch it. Nobody's buying a coffee with it. Nobody's paying their rent with it. And I think those are all true. But what we want to showcase is that, technology is ready. I mean, the Lightning Network, we actually are going to be giving away up to, 2 to 3 thousand what's called Bolt cards, these little NFC cards that have Bitcoin on them. You just tap and go. So
Okay.
we're ready to go toe to toe with the credit card companies, be just as fast as they are. And so we want to put that on display and set this record. So the answer is today, store value for sure. I think in the future, and this is my sort of thesis on it, is I think Bitcoin as a medium exchange will be merchant driven.
Okay.
So it will be people that run businesses that, sell goods and services that will want to acquire Bitcoin, right? You see the MicroStrategies of the world and these big corporations have access to public markets where they can, sell shares and then get Bitcoin in return. Somebody running a barber shop, auto mechanic, a coffee shop, they can't do those things. What they can do is they can sell their services for Bitcoin. And so I think organically over maybe a slower, long period of time, you're going to see more and more companies start accepting it. I think even Steak and Shake just announced, I think in the next 2 days, all their locations are going to accept Bitcoin.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, so it's going to get there. It's going to be slow. People are going to be apprehensive. They're going to be like, do I want to spend my Bitcoin? But I think that as more businesses demand it and as businesses create incentives to do it, for example, at the Bitcoin conference, we offer 21% discounts on all our merch if you pay in Bitcoin versus US dollars.
Nice.
For our F&B lines, we prioritize the lanes for people that want to play in Bitcoin versus fiat. And these aren't just kind of like these kind of like kitschy types of things. We prefer as a bit at BTC Inc. as a Bitcoin business, I prefer people pay us in Bitcoin.
Right.
So I think that that's how we'll see it organically happen as people that run businesses become like Bitcoin adopters. They're going to want Bitcoin. Best way to do it is to sell a good service and earn Bitcoin.
Love it. I'm gonna throw in one last question. What is your
Yeah.
Bitcoin prediction by the end of this year?
So end of this year, and so I want to shout out and show a little bit Bitcoin Magazine Pro. That's where I get like all of my data around all the sort of macro chart stuff. I'm not a trader by any means, but based on my role and where I sit, I need to have a good sense of where the market cycle is.
Sure.
And right now it's interesting. We just had a good run up. We're at 104 now. I think we're going to cool off a little bit, not down so much, but maybe go a little bit sideways. And what's interesting is that inflation print just came in a little bit lower. I think that some of the macro risks that starting Q1 are kind of retreating a bit. The tariff stuff is starting to feel like a little bit less of a tariff tantrum type of
Yeah.
vibe. So anyway, to kind of get to the point, I think end the year. I would say 140, 150 is my guess. I think we'll climb up there, and yeah, just because I have just a general sense that the macroeconomic headwinds that we were more worried about, in the Q1, I think they're starting to retreat a little bit,
Mhm.
and I think yeah, I think Bitcoin still has a little bit ways to run, and also a lot of these Bitcoin treasury companies. I mean, they haven't even sort of gotten the funding yet to really start unloading and buying, some of the big commitments that they have. So,
Sure.
to what degree that's priced in right now, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but there's a lot of tailwinds. So
Sure.
that's kind of where I'll put my guess.
And it seems like every time they drop rates, it seems to spur growth, which seems like second half of this year they're going to really start dropping rates into next year, and that's when you can really see a big bull run.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know Donald Trump is probably not the biggest fan of Jerome Powell, but
Yeah.
his sort of like prodding is going to only get louder if those inflation prints keep coming in the way they did. So yeah, it feels that that's certainly where we're headed, and so yeah, I feel like there's a reason. And like I said, I'm usually someone who's very cautiously optimistic.
Sure.
So yeah, I think the likely case, the more than 50% probability case is that yeah, you're going to see Bitcoin prices much higher than they are today. Like I would be it would take I think a serious like macroeconomic event for it to sort of retreat from these 104 levels
Sure.
that they're currently at.
Absolutely. Well, Dee, thank you so much for coming on. I'll go ahead and put the link to book a ticket for the Bitcoin conference and the description below. But other than that, man, thank you so much for coming on. I'm excited for the Bitcoin conference. I will be there in Vegas. So if you're listening and you want to come, make sure to come say hi. And thank you so much for everything you're doing for Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely, Grant. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers. Thank you, man.
Yep.